Welcome to Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. My name is Mompoloki Mogobe. Our objective is to enthuse, inspire, energize, and empower entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of all stripes here in BW and beyond. We do so by inviting these entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs into our makeshift studio. Sometimes we call them to the restaurant, sometimes we go to our studio, and we ask them to share their experiential knowledge, their experiences and their expertise, and we ask them as many questions as we can, aimed at empowering you also as a viewer. Hello dear listener, dear viewer, my name is Mompoloki Mogobe, your host of this great and wonderful show, Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. It's a privilege and an honor to always bring you dynamic, life-changing, wonderful information that can impact your life. Today we're going to talk about developing reading champions. And in this regard, I'll be talking to an entrepreneur who's an expert in this field and what she's doing entrepreneurially in that regard. Welcome to the studio, Bonolo Gaba. I think I'm saying the name correctly.
Yes, thank you.
Bonolo.
Thank you.
Yes.
Erra.
Yeah.
I appreciate.
I think the starting point is for you to share a little bit of your bio and your background so that people can get to know who you are.
All right. Thanks for having me. As you said, Kibitso Bonolo Gaba, Ketwa Mahalape, Luko Matobo. I'm a teacher by profession. I actually taught for about 10 years in public and private schools. I studied special education, and so Gidi led a degree level. I have a Bachelor of Education in Special Education, specifically learning disabilities, and then Genale a Master's wa Public Administration and Public Policy.
From which universities?
From University of Botswana, both from the University of Botswana, Erra. So after getting my master's, I tried to get into the lecturing environment, and then that is where I finally left to go into what I'm doing now.
Okay.
Erra.
And in terms of the schools where you've taught, what schools are these and what subjects you are teaching?
I was mostly at primary level. I taught I started first Swazi Primary as a temporary teacher, and then I went to Donota, and then I came to Gaborone and got into private schools. I've been to Lahaye English Medium School, I've been to GIS, I've been to Kopano Primary School in Pikwe, and then Broadhurst Primary. Okay. I left that area of teaching, Geloko Broadhurst, going to Vaisaho University as a lecturer of political science.
I see. And these various schools, what are you lecturing on?
I was teaching PSLE subjects, basically all subjects, go primary era. So all subjects that you can think of that are done. I was mostly teaching middle classes, that is standard 4, 5, and 6.
Okay.
Era.
Now let's talk about your venture, your business venture, which is Lowapi Study Center. How did you come up with the name Lowapi? And for those who don't know Setswana, what's the meaning of Lowapi?
Lowapi is the sky, the blue sky that when we look up we see. And Lowapi, usually the cliche is the sky is the limit. But again, I look at the sky, it depends from your point. Where are you looking at it from? The vantage point. So if I'm looking from down here, I look up, I see it as if it's ending. But if I'm up in the sky flying, I'm still in the sky, and it seems it doesn't end. So I'm not really saying the sky is the limit. It depends from where you're viewing it from. If I'm up in the sky, I can still say it's the limit.
Yeah, the stratosphere is unlimited.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, and the name, how did it come about? When did you start the business? And why Lowapi Study Center?
When I registered it back in 2010, I was still a teacher by then, and I just thought of coming up with a tutorial center to help students, to tutor students, general students, but also students who are struggling with learning. As I mentioned, Gidile special education, and so I wanted to see how best I can help those students. Okay. So yeah.
And the Lowapi Center is based where? And how many lecturers involved? Just let us understand this current setup.
Yeah. So Lowapi Study Center is registered as a literacy center. Literacy because we focus on reading. We focus on creating an environment or making reading accessible to learners. And so Lowapi Study Center currently is standing at a staff complement of 15, myself included. It is located in Gaborone G West, Phase 1, Erra.
And you know, you've identified gaps in the classroom.
Yes.
You've identified needs. And I always say that an entrepreneur's job is to solve problems.
Yes.
What are these gaps? What are these needs? What are these problems you are addressing?
Okay. You find that a lot of learners, usually they're referred to as slow learners, modi classic, where they are struggling to finish their work, they're struggling to read, they're struggling with spelling. And I realized that these learners, or we have a lot of learners who at the end of the term, they fail. They have low marks, Bannagobo Group D, and we tend to ignore them in class. We move with the movers because of expectation, objectives, and all that. So they remain behind, and the system leaves them. But the problem is usually just that they can't read. I always say, I look at reading as a pin. Why? You give me your card, which I believe has money, and you give it to me, but you don't give me a pin. I won't be able to access your PIN number, yes. I won't be able to access the funds that I need. So having a card does not mean that I have the money. So we have a system of education that you
may
access.
have it, but you have no access to it.
I don't have access to it. So our teaching and learning system requires you to read and then give me back the information through reading and writing. So if I cannot read and write, I'm not able to access this. And therefore, I bring fail as a mark, but I don't believe I was given a fair chance to judge whether I failed or not.
Another metaphor could be a key.
Yeah.
You know, you need a key to access a particular room. So it is key to read.
Yes, it is key to read.
And in Botswana in particular, because we want to turn these children into champions.
Yes.
Where you are about turning even struggling kids into champions. What is your formula? What do you think is the ideal thing? How do you go about turning them into struggling kids to champs?
My line of thinking is that every child is able. They're just differently able. Our tagline at Lowapi is differently able. You don't rush to see the disability or the inability they have. You rush to see what do they have, what can I work with to make this work for them. Because here we are, we find ourselves in a system that mostly needs us to go through formal education to be able to get somewhere. And I'm saying, let's not leave any child behind. You know, United Nations says, leave no child behind. And I'm saying, we need to close this gap that is there so that we can somehow afford them. I always say, reading is not just for academics. It's not every child who's an academic, okay? But I believe that even if a child loves football, they need to be able to read. So we build their football skills, but we build their reading skill so that when they turn professional, they can read the contract for themselves and know what they're signing up for. So just that, if you're a good cook, but you're not an academic, go the line of cooking, but be able to share your recipes with us because you can read and write. So it's not that I'm saying everyone should go through the academic route. Whatever route you choose, be able to read so that you can have a fair chance at this life thing.
Most of our listeners are entrepreneurs, either aspiring or accomplished.
Yes.
So from their point of view, supposing they're thinking of developing entrepreneurs or replicating themselves in terms of their children, what should be their focus at this point? Suppose someone has a 10-year-old child.
One thing that we need to be mindful of as a parent, especially, is that it starts with confidence. Our mission at Lowapi says building self-belief one child at a time. It doesn't talk about reading, it doesn't talk about learning, and that might seem strange, but this is the reason. The reason is that I realized that if someone is confident in themselves, when you give them this reading thing, they become confident. If someone believes in themselves, they can achieve anything. But if they lack that, if they lack that belief in them, they fail before all else. So it's up to a parent to build your child from home before I, the teacher, build that child, so that they come believing that I am something. But there are things that we do in our environment, whether as parents and sometimes as teachers, that tend to put down kids. For instance, just sitting in group D. When we went to school, kids used to sit in groups. A, B, C, D. Yele had names, all kinds of names. Instance, one of that words. In English, maybe, but they're also bad. And it already puts you down. You already know that I'm not cared for, I'm not important, I am nothing. Sometimes as parents would compare this child with a sibling, with a cousin. Look at your cousin, they're doing this. It puts them down. And so the first thing that we should do before learning is to build self-belief. Build children who believe in themselves, who are independent and all that. Yeah.
And the challenge is not just to slot them in to become whatever ideas you have for them.
Yes.
And how do you address a struggling parent in dealing with that? That look, I'm not going to put my child in a box, in a fixed set of expectations.
Just as we're all different, twins are different, we have different DNA and fingerprints and everything. We need to realize that we are not and should not try to achieve our dreams through our kids, because we put them under pressure. We put ourselves under pressure. Society puts us under pressure. I'm going to take my child to where Mr. Mogobe is taking his child just because we are in that league. My child might not need that particular school because it is not meeting their need. So it's about learning to address children as individuals, even siblings, to know that this is an individual. I wanted to be a scientist. This child wants to be an academic. This one wants a PhD. This one wants to play ball. It's okay. How do we channel it and support them in that, and not just push what it is that we want? Yeah.
To your point about not labeling kids A to D, how do you approach that separation that might sometimes become unavoidable? How do you approach it at Lowapi to make sure that you recognize that some kids are better talented or better able than others?
One thing that we actually struggle with Lowapi, not struggle, but it always comes is where parents and children want to know what it's A gonna be.
Yes.
They want that labeling.
Yes.
And we're like, okay, we just give them marks because we want to encourage a system of competing with yourself and not with the next person. You see, the reason you want to know what am I position 5 is because you want to know where you fare as per the other person. But the issue should be building that individual to say, I got 25 out of 30. That means I just got 5 wrong. Let's focus on that. I got 25 good. That's good. But if you're concerned with the other person got 2018, you fail to see the light that you have, and you fail to see that I only need to close this gap. So it is something that we try to build in parents and students. It's very difficult because it's somehow part of our natural to want competition to be about the next person, to be better than the next person, to beat the next person, next time to be this. And so it's a mindset shift that we constantly have to instill first in parents also, so that we tell them that, guys, the child is able, they're just differently able. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I read about 2 billionaires or very wealthy guys. One is Damon John and the other one is Richard Branson.
Yes.
That they are both dyslexic.
Yes.
And I've heard that a lot of guys who've done exceptionally well are dyslexic.
Yes. Steve Jobs?
Steve Jobs even. And what I've heard is that we perceive it as a disability or as a weakness. Is there an argument for saying, first let's define dyslexia, and is there an argument for saying dyslexia is in fact a strength?
dyslexia is a strength. Richard Branson actually says, I've learned to do business differently because of the way I perceive things, because of the time I take to look at things. And I employ people who are going to close the gaps that I have, that I'm not able to work with. I'll talk also about Whoopi Goldberg. You know, she reads a script to be able to work, and she had to find a way to make it, to say, okay, I'm in this industry that needs me to read. How am I going to get about this? And so she says she'd get a recording of her
She's
her
also
lines.
dyslexic.
She's dyslexic.
Yeah.
She gets her lines recorded or read to her, and that's how she gets. So you see, she has a strength of memory also, so that she can bring it back to us. So there are strengths. If you look at a list of people who are dyslexic out there, you'll see that a lot of them are creatives. It's been said that the scientist, what's his name? The scientist the physicist, the famous physicist, he says he doesn't think in words. He says Albert Einstein.
Albert Einstein,
Yes.
yeah. Okay.
He said to fellow mathematicians, I don't think in words. He says, first it comes as an image. After that, I try to put words to
Don't
it.
tell me he's also dyslexic.
He's dyslexic.
Oh,
and
he was,
he came,
I'm sorry.
yeah, he was dyslexic. And he's the one whose formulas we're using in physics.
E
So-
equals to MC squared.
Thank you. You see, I see you remember that.
Yeah.
And so he says he says this word thing is difficult for me. I don't understand it. So it's not the first thing that comes to mind. So that's why I say they think
So
differently.
in its simplest form, what is dyslexia?
Dyslexia is whereby you process differently, and therefore you'll find that you will have challenges with reading, spelling, comprehension, and reasoning. It's basically a language disability.
So-called.
Yes. So, but what we need to be mindful of is that there's a reading disability, then there's a reading difficulty. Now, the disability is where I'm saying is to do with mind processing and the left and the right side of the brain and all that stuff. Okay. A difficulty comes up that it is not a disability. It's just the result of the environment. Maybe I was not taught at all. Maybe I was not taught properly. Maybe I don't have a proper foundation, and therefore I struggle with reading. So it could be a difficulty and not dyslexia. So we do have statistics say 1 in 10, some say 1 in 5 children, or 1 in 5 people, let me not say children, have dyslexia. But then you'll find that we have a lot of students or individuals where you'll find that 10% or more people have a difficulty of reading. It could just be because they were not given the right foundation.
Okay.
And then it's as if they have dyslexia.
So the obvious question in the context of our topic is that how come dyslexics become champions? And what is the trick? What is it about them becoming champions? Because we're talking about developing reading champions.
Yes. It is about finding what they have and how you can use it to the best of their ability. It is about recognizing that there is ability. It is different. How am I going to channel it? This child, no one comes as an empty vessel. No one comes with nothing to present. So just like Albert Einstein is saying, I don't think this way. We shouldn't force a child to do things the way we are used to, the norm. Let's find out what works. Here's a child who's expected to write a composition. They struggle with words. But this child is an artist. How about they draw to show their line of thinking in terms of the topic? Then later on you can get them to say, so what is happening here? Why should you say all 20 of us should write the composition if you know that I struggle with writing? Obviously, it's somehow already setting me up for failure. So it's
So
about
what other reading challenges are there apart from dyslexia that you're encountering?
reading itself is divided into a number of things. When you talk about reading, the first thing we talk about is decoding. Decoding is just the normal, what I see this word is this and I interpret it as that. And then now there is the actual comprehension. Do I comprehend what I'm reading? And there's vocabulary. I want to talk about vocabulary and link it to what we were saying about parents and what they can do. You see, vocabulary is very important. If you're not exposed, vocabulary is also due to, it develops because of exposure. If you're not exposed to something, you're not going to know of its existence, and then it affects your comprehension. When I do workshops, I give an example of saying, I'm going on my yacht this holiday. If you don't know what a yacht is, you don't understand the whole sentence. You don't know what I'm going to do. But if you just know that it means a fancy boat, you have an idea of what I'm going to do. So exposure. So it's about, so there's that part, those are the things that contribute to a reading problem. So a child can be able to decode words, that is, be able to see that the sentence says, this is a cat, and the cat is on the mat. But does the child now understand? And that understanding is built on knowing the definition of cat, mat, sat. Then they can know that. I've seen instances in the classroom when you're talking about examples where a child is given a picture and they see a picture of a thumb. They don't know that this is a thumb. And that child would, this will only be understandable to Botswana, that child will say, Kia, because when you say this in our environment, you're greeting. So they don't know that there's a thumb. He sees a picture of this, you know, so that is just an issue.
Meaning hello.
Hello.
Yes. Or everything is good.
Everything is good.
Yeah.
So this child interprets it according to how he's seen this being used in the environment. He's not exposed to the fact that this is a thumb. And therefore, if a sentence is going to come and have thumb, he's not going to understand it. And then we say he can't read, he can't spell. So vocabulary plays a huge role, and comprehension plays a huge role.
Are you saying it's possible for someone to misinterpret lack of exposure to reading for a child, to confuse it with a disability or as a weakness?
It's possible. It's possible because you'll see a parent coming in and say, my child doesn't spell, this child writes Greek. Now it brings me to how we teach reading. You see, reading is about an understanding of the letter-sound relationship. Now, unlike talking comes naturally, okay? But reading is something that we came up as a culture, and therefore it has to be taught. Now, if we don't teach it, it means I'm not going to be exposed to it. Of course, there are some people who it seems as if they're like catching on it quicker. So, the reason a parent would say this child is writing Greek is because if I have not been taught that the letter S makes the sound S, if I say write the word set, was like a K, and write KRE, because you have no context of understanding the relationships between letters and sounds.
Okay.
We don't read letters, we read sounds.
There's a perception that parents are better off taking their children to English medium schools by reason of the fact that English is the language of business, and yet 95% of students are taught at Tswana medium schools. How do you resolve that dichotomy, and what are your views on that?
Earlier on, you talked about the gaps. And one gap that answers your question is the fact that in our public schools, Standard 1 is taught in Setswana. Then immediately go Standard 2, we teach in English. So Standard 1, you're reading, you're learning breakthrough to Setswana, and most of your subjects, if not all, are taught in Setswana. If you look at the textbooks that are written in Setswana, even science is written in Setswana, then Standard 2, now read types of abuse. That is actually a topic in Standard 2. Now, how do I move from reading Kebona Nana Lila to types with a TY? And when does TY become TY, and when does it become TI? So that is where the challenge is. And don't get me wrong, I'm not pushing the Queen's language more than I'm pushing
the vernacular.
The vernacular. But it's one thing that plays a role, because if immediately, I remember it frustrated me in Tonota. I was teaching Standard 2s in Tonota, and I realized that the kids who kind of had an idea are those who had passed through preschools before and kind of had an idea of English better than those who had just started in using Setswana. This is where the challenge is now. this is where the challenge is. As much as we're teaching breakthrough to Setswana, we need to be teaching breakthrough to English, if I may call that. We need, because it's very difficult. Imagine Kostwaning, I'm telling you that G is in English.
It's guttural.
Yes. In English, now G is G, girl.
Which is soft. It's no longer guttural.
Yeah. So it's those
subtleties
that become a problem, and you find that it becomes very difficult when children usually come to us in the middle of their years, and they've been taught that A is ah, and then you have to teach them how to read cat and how to write what it's at. And so how do you close those gaps to bring this about?
Some of us, I don't know about you, where I'm from the background of Tswana medium.
Yes.
But we'd like to think we turned out okay.
Yes, we did.
And so I'm just wondering to myself whether we shouldn't stick with the Tswana medium system just for purpose of preservation of culture, and then perhaps have people like Lowapi come in to enhance our adjustment in dealing with English. It's just a wild thought I'm having. I don't know whether you have any views on that.
If we could find a way to teach reading, not to teach English language, because there's a distinction. We're not teaching nouns, we're not teaching how do you read, because we take that for granted. So as much as we're being deliberate about teaching kids how to read Setswana, let's be deliberate about teaching them how to read English. Because at the end of the day, the teaching language and the language of business is English from standard 2 upwards. Setswana now becomes a subject. But we have now not taught the language of teaching up until you have to read living things. And you have no idea how to put L and I together to make li. You know.
So how does Lowapi address these needs, these challenges? We talked about dyslexia, we talked about the other forms of reading challenges. How is Lowapi addressing this with the objective of creating reading champs?
All right. The first thing that we do at Lowapi that we value a lot is creating awareness. Awareness, because I believe that everything begins with knowledge. If you have an idea as a parent that there could be a problem, that is the beginning of everything. That is the beginning of you trying to find a route or a solution for your child. So the first thing that we do as Lowapi is we have awareness workshops for parents for free. We have gone to different places, to different schools, to talk to parents, to talk to teachers, just to create awareness of this reading problem, so that when we see a child in group D, we don't just judge them in that manner. We know that there could be a problem. They're not just lazy, they're not stupid, they're not dumb, which are the words that are used to describe them. So the first thing that is important and very close to my heart is creating awareness. Then Lowapi, as I said, is a literacy center. So we have part-time and full-time programs whereby we work with kids who have been termed slow. And whether they're dyslexic or not is not really the issue. The issue is that we're just trying to give them that foundation to reading. Because a lot of them come now because their parent says, my child is in standard 3 and cannot read, and they're failing, and I don't know what to do. I've taken them to tutors, I've taken them everywhere, they've repeated, but it's still not working. And we check and we're like, it's just, they're missing a very foundational thing. If this thing was closed,
and
that'd be okay.
what thing normally is that?
It's the understanding of the letter-sound relationship. Just being intentional about teaching them that this translates to this. So you teach them to read, and then you teach them to write, which is the spelling part. That is all reading. Because I can read cat. It's possible for me to read cat but not know how to write it. And then some kids play with our minds a bit, because you'll find that they're able to read certain words. But those words is words that they've come across over and over time. Now they've memorized them. And we call those sight words. So someone said, if I teach you 10 words, you only know those 10 words. But if I teach you 10 sounds, you can create so many words just with those 10 sounds. And that is what we do through our part-time and full-time reading programs. We teach the letter-sound relationship, because reading starts with hearing. about manipulating sound, and therefore we teach step-by-step structured multisensory approaches. Multisensory is using different senses. Don't just assume that every child should read the board and write on the board. Sometimes it's not appealing to the child. Use dough, use tapping, use music, whatever that you have to use to get through to the child.
I think this is a good time to talk about a book that you've written.
Yes.
I have it here, Phonics
Of Phonics.
Phonics.
Yes.
Explain the title of the book and the inspiration for it.
All right, Phonics of Phonics is actually a lockdown project. The very first lockdown, my friend and I got together, decided to be locked down in the same place, and we came up with Phonics of Phonics. The idea was that we are not able to address, okay, our center is only based in Gaborone, but at the same time, we're not able to help all kids who come, because I will tell you, reading is a problem with a lot of children.
Let's explain the title. Phonics with PH and Phonics with FO.
Yes.
What are the distinctions in them? And
This is actually what I was talking about the letter sound relationship. When PH makes the sound F makes the sound F, when do we decide to use the F for F or the PH? So those are rules that are there in language that have to be taught. But when we write phonics, the correct method for this particular time is the PH. When you say photo, but if we're to say fly, we're not going to use PH, we're going to use F. So those are rules that are there in language that have to be taught to a child to know that when we say buzz, it's going to be double Z at the end and not a
How
single.
far do you go with that? Because some of these rules come from whether or not the word is, historically from France,
Yes.
French, or is it from German? Because a lot of English borrows from other things.
True.
There's a lot of Latin there as well.
True, very true.
So are you going to now teach a child to go that deep to understand that that far?
No, not really. We don't go that deep. We have what we call, to make it easy, we just say rule breakers. To say there are obviously going to be words that break the rules. For instance, bus. The rule in English is that usually, so that's why we use the word usually. Usually, if you hear the sound at the end of a word, you double it, or in the middle. So
Like business.
business. Now, if you hear, then you have a rule breaker like bus. So we don't go into the nitty-gritties of it's from
Which
historically French or whatever, but we just teach it at a level that is simplified for a child to learn. When do we say rock and use CK, and when do we say k just with a C or with a K?
Okay.
Yes.
And insofar as this book is concerned, this specific one, it's ideal for which level of child, and why is that?
So what we did with Phonics of Phonics, we've actually put the very same structure that we're using at Lowapi into book format. So we've basically taken our teaching style and put it in book format for a parent to use at home. And this is the very same structure that we use for children as early as 5 years old or 4 years old. And it seems as if we might be talking more about struggling kids, but this is also a good resource for a child who just needs to learn how to read, to create a foundation. And as long as a child can talk, they can start to learn how to read. So it can be used for a child as young as 4 years old and all the way up. We've had clients who are 19 years old, who are out of school and all that using it.
Okay.
Erra.
I see you have a stack here also.
Yes,
Perhaps,
sir.
you want to explain what this is and what's
Okay.
the relevance
Okay.
to
So
creating champions. Let's not forget our purpose.
About champions,
Yes.
yes. This is actually a reading kit which comes with the workbook and then a parent manual. This is a step-by-step guide. Remember, I'm saying this
You're
is
not
what we
just
use.
guiding the child, you're guiding the parent as well.
This is for the parent. I'm telling you, when you're sitting with your child and you have to teach them a sound, you're going to teach it in the correct way so that when you see, so these are sound cards, okay? We read sounds, right? And then we write letters. So we teach the sounds. So this is what you used to teach the child. And so that as you're teaching them, I teach you, this is sound A, like in think, so that you don't find yourself saying pronouncing it wrongly at E, which is in Setswana. So we have a pronunciation guide in this book so that you know that
For the parent.
for the parent.
So they can teach the child at home.
So the parent becomes the champion also. You're smart in the face of your child. You're teaching them how to read.
Yeah.
So you're saying this is E like in ink. So that you don't say pin, it's a pin. So this is for correct pronunciation. So you follow this, it gives you the word cards to give. So the child uses these sound cards to build words. Once they know that this is S and this is Eh and this is T, they bring it together to make sat. Then they make pat and go on. So what happens is this has about 40 sounds. And with 40 sounds, you can read so many words that by the end of it all, you're able to even make phrases. And we have the phrases there for you to say out to your child, then they start writing it. So done right, by the end of this, your child will be able to read and write phrases like a doll in a van, buzzer bee, and whatever sounds, because it has used the basic sounds. So it's a foundation.
Are you able to share some, some victories or some great examples of where Lowapi was able to achieve something significant for the child, for the family, without necessarily mentioning names?
We have so many parents who brought their children. They themselves were at a point of giving up, and we've had children. Oh, let me just start here to show you the impact we are making. We actually began in 2019. And out of the garage of our house, and we had 2 kids part-timers only. Now we're sitting at 60 kids full-time. So that can just show you that it's mainly word of mouth to say, my child, as parents we talk and say, my child has been struggling here and this is what Lowapi was able to do for us. So we have students who we have taken through the program and they're able to read. Now it's about working on the comprehension and getting them now to understand whatever
Yeah,
it is
but I
they're
want
reading.
you to be shameless and plug your success stories, please. What happened? There was a child, a standard show, he couldn't do this. Now, after I dealt with them, this is the result.
Okay. We had one child, you were talking about the ages. We had one child who came in last year who was in Form 1. And this child struggled with reading and writing. And they're already at a Form 1 level. And Form 1 brings more challenges because you've got 9 subjects. You've just moved from a basic of multiple choice. You're now expected to do a lot of reading and continuous writing. So we had this Form 1 child who struggled to read. We took her through the program and were able actually to graduate her from it and just say, okay, now you're in a place where now whatever it is that you're going to learn, you can now use it. Because we can't say we exhaust all the English words, isn't it?
No.
But some we pick as we get exposed to them. So we have had very good success stories where a child was not able to read, but they're able to read. Just last week, 2 weeks back, we're in Palapin, and there's a parent there who used to be our client here, and she would not stop telling the Palapians about us to say, look, trust it. You can go through the system and you'll see change in your child.
Yeah.
And without being shamed, as you say, I promise you, in 2 weeks, we take your child, you come and tell us. I won't say anything.
Yeah. And is the Ministry of Education, Basic Education, coming to appreciate your services? And in fact, is there a way you can work cooperatively with them to augment what they are doing?
I'm hoping that we can find a way. I'm hoping that we can find a way because this is passion for me.
Yes.
And I'm hoping that I have tried to open my doors and to knock on their doors to see how we can come together to work together to, if possible, take this into schools. We'll see our standard 1's reading.
Yeah.
And so I'm open for that conversation and open to even having conversations even with people who are preschoolers, for instance, preschool owners, to say this is something that we can get our kids out reading by the time they're going to primary level.
Okay.
So
You have a specific message for parents, things to note as a parent. What are those things that we need to be specifically aware of as parents?
be intentional about building your child's self-esteem. Don't don't be the reason for your child's low self-esteem, or at least don't contribute to it. Whoopi Goldberg, if I may refer back to her, she said, at school they just thought I was lazy and dumb. But my mother saw this, but she also realized my passion for acting. And during school time, she would take me to the museums to be able to appreciate plays and stuff like that. So as a parent, you are the number one support for your child. You are the one who can build your child up. Secondly, be intentional about building vocabulary in your children. As much as I teach a child how to read, vocabulary is what is going to help them comprehend whatever it is that they're reading. And so you have to be intentional. Go with them to the shops and communicate with them. Tell them,
What do you think of this little trick that I try sometimes? Linking the payment of the allowance or whatever you call it, a stipend,
Yes.
linking it to actual reading. You read this much, you get your stipend. Isn't that an ethical bribe, and what do you think of it?
I'm sorry to say I don't support that.
Yes, that's fine, but why?
I don't support it, especially if a child is still struggling. If a child is able, it's okay because you see that their potential, they're not just tapping into it.
Let's assume that they're able.
If they're able, it's okay. It's okay because it gets them motivated to see that there's an end result somehow. But for a child who is struggling, it is not, I wouldn't put it at the forefront of everything.
How would you approach it for that child who's struggling? Simply refer them to Lowapi.
No. Well, yes, get the reading kit.
Yeah.
Lowapi doesn't have any spaces full time anymore.
Yeah.
But appreciate anything about them. Today, I don't know if it's a cultural thing. Maybe you have a viewpoint. We're not a society that really appreciates and can say, I love your suit. We are always so quick to put negatives. But if a child is not doing well academically, there should be something that you can applaud them for. I realize that now you're able to dress yourself, to tie your shoes. I see you play football better. You're good at this. You did well this. Don't shame your 10%. You did better than last time. Last time you got a 5%. So that we build that in them.
Continually compliment them.
Continually compliment them. It builds their self-esteem. Sometimes all a child needs is a star. You know, that is why it seems as if sometimes private schools are doing something. They just build a child's self-esteem. A child starts from preschool or reception class standing in front of the assembly and saying, good morning, students. And therefore, at the end, we will feel as if private school students are better off, but because mostly they first built their self-esteem. And you'll find that the private school students will seem to be able to express themselves better. And this one would have passed, but not able to express themselves and not able to come out and say, I am Simamang and I deserve this job with you, or anything like that. So self-esteem and being intentional about teaching them vocabulary. This has taken us away from a lot of things, from interaction with our kids. I always give an example. My own child had delayed speech, and that is one of the characteristics of a child who might have dyslexia. My own child had delayed speech. She's going on 4 next month.
She spoke at what year instead of what year?
Well, she was attempting to speak by 2, but it was very limited compared to kids her age.
So I ended up speaking at what age?
She's now 3, and she's speaking very better because I know where she's coming from. Now, this is what I mean by being intentional. When I go out and leave the house, I say, bye, baby, I am going. So I don't talk to her just in short verbs. Mommy, go. I talk to her as I would talk to you. So it is me being intentional. So I always give this example and say, I remember when now I was bathing her in the evening, and then I opened the plug for the tub. The water was going. She said, Mommy, look, the water is going. I said, yes, baby, it's going. After it finished, she said, it's gone. That is just conversation, because now she knows going means it is in the process. Gone means it has happened.
Okay.
So
this conversation will not be complete unless I ask you about, by the way, you're going to get to ask me a question, but let me ask you the last one. Spell B and the importance of spelling. Do you know about the spell B, and how does all this tie with actual spelling of words?
I know about the spelling bee. Actually, when I started Lowapi, I had something called Word Power Challenge. I did it back in 2012. It's a form of spell bee. I just didn't want to use those words. It's a good.
What does it do?
Spelling bee is where
what
the Word Power Challenge.
Yeah.
It's the same thing basically. It's a competition whereby kids are given list of words and then they learn them and then they compete by spelling. The famous Akila and the Bee movie
I love that.
made that.
With Lawrence Fishburne.
Yes, it made that a famous thing that we got to learn about. But a spelling bee is just a spelling challenge, orally spelling. And now that one now brings that depth of the Latins and the French and the whatever. They learn it to that depth. But it is an important part of teaching kids how to spell. Because for instance, it's not that when you've done our program or gone through our system, we've exhausted everything. And therefore, some of the words you're going to get to know by coming in contact with them and learning them through spelling. So it is a good thing that helps with spelling.
So you're no longer doing it?
It has taken a back seat for a while. It took a back seat. It's something that I'd love to revive. Back then, it was a challenge of sponsorship, or let me say funds, not sponsorship, and all the like. But it's something that I'd love to revive.
This is where I'm sure you've seen previous episodes. At the end, you get to ask me any question you want.
Any question I want. Here's 2021. As entrepreneurs, we saw 2020 bringing the obvious challenge of COVID. What lesson have you learned as an entrepreneur from COVID? I don't believe you just took it as a negative. We possibly have to get a positive from it.
Yeah, we've coined a phrase. We've coined a phrase called the COVID dividend. And I think as a country, the biggest dividend is that people have realized that they cannot depend on government, and people have come to realize that they cannot depend on some authority. So I think personally, it's something that I was aware of, but it's been reinforced that we cannot really rely on an external factor. It lies within you. It's intrinsic in terms of, finding solutions to the challenges. What I see is that entrepreneurship has literally exploded around COVID. I've seen that people like yourselves, their businesses have grown, and I've interviewed a number of young business people and young entrepreneurs who have said to me bluntly that COVID has helped us. So in as much as it was a terrible thing, people have gone online, they've learned how to use this thing more profitably, and I think that there's been a mind shift, a paradigm shift. So COVID has been a terrible thing. We've lost a lot of our loved ones. In my family, we've lost so many. I'm not even going to count. But in my extended family, I'm referring to. But overall, as a country, the youngsters have really stopped talking. Oh, the government will do this. They are asking themselves, what can I do? What can I get up and do and change my circumstances? So if there's any benefit, even for our company, we've become less concerned about our setbacks and more concerned about our solutions going forward.
I love that. Well, COVID brought a lot of good. I got a book out of it.
I was going to ask you how it has impacted Lowapi, and how did you take advantage of it?
For me, actually, it didn't bring any negative. After we did have a lockdown for 2 months or so. When we opened in May, I closed, I think, with about 20 or so students. When we opened, I got almost 15 students on top. Because parents were now like, they preferred smaller classes because our classes ranged to 6 to 10 students. Last days was actually just 7 students in a class. And so parents seem to now prefer that more. They preferred learning that is more individualized because we keep our small numbers to be able to.
What about online learning?
We had it. It is there, though not as robust, mainly because some of our clients did not have that access at home. So even during the the lockdown, it was difficult to provide online learning for all our students. We did have just reading lessons for some students.
Okay, we've come to the end. I want you to talk about to inspire and motivate that viewer. Talk about how they can get their child to be a champion, and as a parting, message overally as we conclude our conversation. Look at that camera.
Well, as I said at the beginning, every child is able. They're just differently able. So you need to learn to recognize the ability in your child and pull that out of them. And Phonics or Phonics is actually one way to get your child reading confidently. So I'd encourage you to look into getting yourself a copy of Phonics or Phonics. And actually, because we are only in Gaborone, we have decided to have mobile clinics. And so our first mobile clinic will be in April in Palape. So we'll be there for a month. And so you can enroll your child with us if you're in Palape for our mobile clinic. So Phonics or Phonics, every child can read.
Wonderful, wonderful. And how do the viewers and the entrepreneurs out there, how do they get hold of your business, the study center, Lowapi, and how do they get hold of you?
All right. We have a website, www.lowapi.org, and you can also get us on email, admin@lowapi.org, or call or WhatsApp us on 77804-467, 77804-467. And we're also on Facebook and on Instagram as Lowapi Study Center. So do find us there and talk to us, ask us anything. We will gladly help.
Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful guest. You've done a good job.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.